I used to follow this account on Twitter. I think it was called Bad Sports Refs or something in that vein. And it was exactly what it promised to be. It was just refs blowing calls in sports horribly. And the social dynamic was a big part of the draw for me because people go in there, they would see what was just an inarguably bad missed call, and then they'd all pile on. And it was kind of fun because you get mostly agreement. But also part of the fun was inevitably you would have people who root for the team that benefited from the botched call. And they'd be in there being like, no, if you look close, like the ball is still kind of moving. And no, like from this angle, well, it might look like that from the camera angle, but I think, and they would just talk themselves into wild pretzels of logical dishonesty to try and justify the fact that their team got lucky and benefited from a thing. But every now and then, you would have something come down the pike there with one of these bad call videos where a ref would miss something or an umpire would miss something so inarguably glaring that it would unify the internet for just that one glistening, beautiful little moment where everybody would be like, no, we all agree. We have all verified this using our five senses and have determined that indeed that call was wrong. And surely if the umpire or ref was watching the clip as well, they'd be like, yeah, I got that one wrong. And my favorite ever is this clip from what I think is a Mexican baseball league. It's somewhere in Latin America. And everything's normal. There's a pitcher and he's throwing pitches to a batter. And if you're not a baseball person, that's all right. This is still going to make sense. The pitcher winds up and he throws the pitch. And it's a good pitch, which means that even if the batter doesn't swing, it's a strike. The umpire is going to rule it a strike. But the batter does swing and he misses, which means the umpire doesn't have to do anything. Everybody saw it. The umpire doesn't call anything out or yell anything. It's just recorded as a strike because everybody has eyes and the guy swung and the ball went into the catcher's mitt. Like that right there, that's a strike. Like, no exceptions. It's real easy. Except the umpire rules it a ball and the officials are confused. The batter is confused, but like, okay. And play just, I guess, goes on eventually. And it was so fun because everybody, literally everybody, including even that umpire's mom, would have to admit, look, we all saw the thing. It was unmissable. And the reality is that was a strike. Let there be no argument or debate on this thing. And it just happens so rarely. Well, likewise, the disciples in Matthew 24, they asked a simple question a long time ago. And Jesus is taking a somewhat circuitous route to give them their answer. But their question was just, when is this unfolding of history, this end of time stuff going to happen? And what will be the sign of Jesus coming and the end of the age? And as you well know, if you've been hanging out with me, rather than starting by saying, oh, well, the sign of the end of everything will be this. Instead, Jesus takes a bunch of time on talking about what the sign of the end of things won't be. And he starts with a bunch of things that are just going to happen over the course of history. They're going to seem like the biggest deal ever in the moment, but they're not the biggest deal ever. They won't undo the order of nature or usher in the end of a cosmic age and the relationship between the physical world and the deity who made it all and governs it all. No. They're big deals, but they're blips on the radar. Then, as you well know, Jesus goes on to describe some profaning of the temple or that which is holy that's going to occur. And he indicates that, like, now we're getting somewhere. But still, these are all calls that could be debated. Different people could watch the unfolding of the ball game of history and look at some of those rulings by the officials and be like, that could go either way. Some interpret it that way. Some interpret it that way. Well, if you already have biases or rooting interests toward this team, you're probably going to agree with that interpretation, that call, that read right there. If you don't, you might lean the other way. But it's all in the realm of debate, maybe one way or the other. It's a push. But now we've seen Jesus starting in the mid-20s, verse 25, 26. We've seen him starting to warm up to the idea of really now answering their question. It's not this. This gets you a little closer, but this is what the sign of the coming of the Son of Man, the sign of the end of the age, is actually going to look like. And when it happens, just like that completely botched swinging strike that got called a ball, where no one could debate the reality of the situation, so this return of the Son of Man is going to be unmissable. unmissable. Verse 29, Jesus says, immediately after the distress of those days, the distress of those days being the profaning of the temple and everything that happens after that, the fallout that comes with it. He goes on to say, quoting from Isaiah 13, and I think somewhere else in Isaiah as well, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. At that time, the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and all the nations of the earth will mourn. They will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory, and he'll send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. I am positive that up to this point, the disciples were like, oh, okay, okay. Could we have like notes or an outline or bullet points or something? I think I maybe understood that sentence, but then I didn't understand those four. I'm not sure where this is going. We just want to know what the sign was going to look like. Can you come back to the sign part? When do we get to the sign? This is super hard. And now I'm guessing that there's a reorientation where they're like, okay, sort of got all that stuff before, but you came back to the heart of it. The sign is going to look like this and it will be unmissable. So all of this distress is going to happen coming out of this profaning of the temple event, whatever that turns out to be. And then we get this Old Testament language about creation itself being destabilized. Now, there's some question here about whether Jesus is invoking this language literally, like, the sky's going to get dark and the moon will quit working, stars will fall from the sky, and like, there's going to be earthquakes and stuff. Is this like all physical stuff that needs to happen in order for Christians to have a good sense of how the Bible works? Like, you got to go and make like moonfall type theories to come up with how these things could physically occur. Other folks are going to look at this, and I lean this way. You can read between the lines socially based on just how I frame that up. I lean toward this being maybe something a bit more figurative, perhaps with a few elements of the literal mixed in, but it feels like in the classical world or in the ancient Near East, when these words were originally recorded in what we call the Old Testament, that this would be language that would holistically describe the undoing of the physical order. In the same way that we might say, it's earth-shattering news. We don't literally mean that the earth got shattered. We mean that it has massive implications that change everything. And every time we use the phrase earth-shattering news, it really isn't. It's an overstatement. Here, based on what we go on to read, it's maybe, if anything, an understatement to invoke such apocalyptic language. And so then we get Jesus' payoff here where he says, at that time, the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and all the nations on the earth will mourn. Now, there's some question here about whether we're talking about one thing that will appear in the sky, that just being the Son of Man coming on the clouds, whatever that looks like, or two separate things, one that precedes the Son of Man coming on the clouds and then the Son of Man coming on the clouds. I remember as a kid going through this passage, I don't remember, church, youth group, somewhere. I remember some adult saying that there is this old tradition that there would be like a chi and a rho, like the Greek symbols for Christ, or a cross, or who knows, maybe a dove or something like that would appear up in the sky, like skywriting or something, like what you see depicted in that medieval art that the Monty Python and the Holy Grail is always kind of making fun of. Like this idea of something appearing as a visible sign that has actual semiotic significance, not just like, oh, look, it's another star, like kind of back at the beginning of Jesus' life. No, like something that actually is a symbol or something in some way. And you can see that assumption rattling around in the back of the minds of the Christians of the first few centuries. I mean, before the Battle of Milvian Bridge, I don't remember what year that was, but it was early 4th century. This was the battle where Constantine the Great, defeated his rival Maxenius. And I think the story goes that on the eve of battle, Constantine saw, I think it was the chi and the rho in a vision or a dream, like in the sky, conquer by this. And so he puts those emblems on the shields or the armor of his troops. And with according to the artistic depiction in the Vatican Museum from the Middle Ages, a giant fresco depicting this, The angels showed up and helped Constantine defeat the hideous green-skinned mongrel-looking Maxenitis who was bad and not Christian. And so the idea that this symbol would appear in the sky and that this somehow would mean something of apocalyptic or prophetic significance for God doing some very important thing, we even see in the classical Christian world different people latching on to that imagery and that assumption. So that gives me a hint that at least for some time, at least some Christians interpreted Matthew 24:30, at that time the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky and all nations of the earth will mourn, to mean something very, very literal. But I also know that a bunch of other people interpret that to mean that the sign will be the Christ, that Jesus just shows up somehow like unascending, because you remember over in Acts chapter 1, he ascends to the right hand of the Father. And so I guess if he were to come back, he would just come back from where he went. And so that's the expectation there. And so acknowledging that we've got a lot more to think about here over the next couple of conversations, what we're getting then is an unmissable call. In a sense, we're all refs of life and history, watching everything play out. And as each play occurs, we make our value judgment as to what's right there, or what's actually going on, or what does it mean? What's the significance? And, sometimes right, sometimes we're wrong. Probably a lot of what we think is going to fall within the, acceptable window of maybe that could be it. And there's going to be a lot of debate and a lot of disagreement about how to interpret history. But the sign of the coming of the Son of Man, as Jesus describes it, will be unmissable, unarguable. Everybody's going to see it, and everybody's going to be like, well, that ain't normal. And this sign and this coming of the Son of Man represents the beginning of the end of the age of everything is a debate and everything is up for interpretation, and moves it toward the, oh, wow, I guess every single one of us is wrong about a bunch of stuff. But all of our debate and philosophizing and arguing and talking heads and pundits and everything else and likes and dislikes and like all of that, it's over, because when this sign of the coming of the Son of Man occurs, according to Jesus, there's a shift here in reality as we know it, away from the age of debate and toward the age of bend the knee, because that is inarguably true and real and everybody can see it for exactly what it is. Thanks to everybody who's a patron of the program. If you ever want to sign up for that, there's always a link down in the show notes below. You can also not sign up for it. It's cool. We're just having fun either way, but I appreciate those of you who are able to help make the thing happen. That's awesome. More on this tomorrow. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.